We have Greg Young, Global Vice President of Cybersecurity for Trend Micro, a multinational cybersecurity product company. He's headed several large security consulting practices throughout his career, was the Chief Information Security Officer for the Federal Department of Communications, and was with Gartner for 14 years in various capacities, including Research Vice President and Lead Analyst to several cybersecurity verticals. Greg, welcome.
Hey, Nathan. Really great to talk to you today.
You as well. Can we start by just getting a little bit about your background and maybe what drew you to the field of cybersecurity to start with?
It's my 34th year in cybersecurity. That's a frightening number, but it was all by accident that, I had some computer science classes. The military found out about it, and they immediately put me into securing these new things that were called computers that they had. And from there forward, I just, being a technology lover, I just fell in with it. And it was an important mission that, I started wanting to be a policeman, combine these two things together, and the rest was history, military, federal government, private sector. And here we find ourselves today, and we still haven't solved it all. So shame on us.
Well, I appreciate your work for 34 years. That's fantastic. I mean, how is the arms race different at all now in cybersecurity than it was, let's say, 30 years ago?
Radically different. There's been one sort of, circle back that we've had that it started out that, sort of the state-sponsored stuff was a big concern, that we're very concerned about, the bad Soviets were going to steal our information, and rightfully so. And that was, the major threat at the time. But it really quickly evolved as the internet expanded into individuals. But now we've swung back again now that it's very well-funded, individuals, but also state-sponsored groups are a big concern as well on one end of sort of the, the bell curve. But that side of the bell curve is expanding. So it's really changed. I think the biggest change also has been that the malware has changed. It used to be, one sort of attack, one infection that was done, but now it's multiple chains, reconnaissance. The complexity of the attacks and the expansion of them and the patience of the groups is just so different than it used to be. So it's gotten much more complex.
Have we innovated in any spaces to accommodate for that? Like what have the changes looked like? What are the focuses now when it comes to cybersecurity protection?
Yeah, I think, frankly, the industry didn't do a great job in the last sort of, 5-6 years in some ways. We had some great sort of periods of advancement. We're getting ahead of the bad guys. I think we were a bit behind in some ways, but there's some really cool things happening right now, which I'm encouraged about personally. So one of them is that gathering more telemetry, more information, more signals, and making better use of it. We've kind of promised about that in the past, but haven't done it. So there's technologies they call like XDR, or expanded detection and response. What it's doing is it's gathering a whole bunch of information from non-traditional sources and using that to make those sort of dots that we can connect. So instead of just sort of the front door alarm in your house, now we're gathering other signals like, heat sensors or temperature changes or noise monitors. Think of like all these other things we could have sensors about, which could give us an indication the bad guys are getting in. So that's one. I think also making products work better together. That this sort of vendor silo business that's just been terrible for everybody involved, and having stuff communicate better, and also individual sort of products working with even the portfolios better. So we talk about platforms, we talk about that, and new architectures. We've had the same architectures for, almost 30 years, and those are starting to change now. So it's all good news, I think.
Excellent. So I think you touched on some of these trends that are happening today in cybersecurity. What are they serving to help protect in particular when we're talking about these trends?
What we're trying to solve now is very different. So it used to be kind of spot the bad thing, kill the bad thing, that whack-a-mole game. Now I think the game has changed. So we know we're going to find things. It's just how fast can we find it? So lowering that time to detection, time to response. And I think also just knowing where to look, that even just knowing what our attack surface is, what sort of machines we have that are even, what machines do we have that we need to protect? Those are two massive tasks we have that are turned out to be some of the hardest things.
So are we talking about kind of corporate level, industry level, organization level protection, or are we also talking about individuals or communities, kind of government initiatives or things like that?
Yeah, both fronts. I think most of the effort required individually right now is just for individual organizations to know what they have, being able to spot stuff, get better telemetry and faster time to response. That's kind of the, the individual or local level. But then going beyond that, there's great things happening. Like, for example, an organization called MITRE, with the MITRE attack framework, is helping make more repeatability, or giving us sort of a playbook that when we see some really advanced attacks happening, you get an earlier sort of clue about it and saying, yes, this is, the East European fancy bear group that is doing this. It makes it, faster time to detection. So there's some sort of intergroup sharing, but I think that's probably the next generation of advancement to be made.
Fantastic. And so, again, thinking about, when, whether it's a small business or a large organization, when should they be concerned about cybersecurity? Is there a specific time? Is it a specific type of a small business or large organization? What are your thoughts around that?
The day you start your business, you have to unfortunately be concerned. It used to be the case that only sort of big organizations used to get hit, or if you have a lot of money. But folks don't care now. The baddies don't care. One example was we put up a fake factory. We even used equipment. We didn't just try to virtualize it and pretend, because they can spot that. So we put up actual equipment that looks like a factory and analyzed who was attacking it. We made it vulnerable. There was two groups. There was the targeted ones who would say, yes, this is a factory. We know what we're doing. But close to the majority were just drive-by people and said, hey, a Windows machine, we're going to try to ransomware it. So, but that indicates to me is that it's, even if you're a nonprofit organization, even if you have two machines, sadly, you're a potential target.
So what are the threats? And you mentioned ransomware. What are the threats that they should be most concerned about, and what can they do about it?
The biggest ones today, I think, are, number one is phishing, or folks trying to get you through email, because it turns out that over 90% of attacks have email vector involved somewhere in them. And email is cheap. Phishing is easy, and we see that every day as you get false attempts to either steal your credentials, get you to pay money to somewhere you shouldn't, etc. So that's, I think, number one. Number two, ransomware is always a result of this. That if you have any vulnerability, the bad guys can do two things. They can use that vulnerability to install ransomware or other malware, or use you as a platform to do other kinds of attacks. So I think that's the two big things, is that if you take the 3 steps of, back your stuff up, patch what you have, and then, try to have, some level of other visibility. I think that's the 3 steps I think that can protect most businesses.
Interesting. I've also heard a lot about kind of the psychological plays that come in here, kind of the social engineering that comes to some of these threats. And so thinking back at the individual level, I mean, a small business is still, or a large business, at the end of the day, constitutes a bunch of individuals that might be targeted. So, how important are those? Is this kind of the psychology behind this? And, is there anything that can be done to prevent cybersecurity on that, prevent breaches on that front?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to do that. So one, in fact, is interesting you bring that up, because this social engineering is a whole new sort of slice of the pie that's been expanded lately. Because if you can't get through technology, use the phone to fool people. And there's some great people who do that. Especially you see them on the conference circuit. They do a great job of it. But beyond that, what they're trying to do is then get you to do something, such as install something or send some information. And that second step is where technology can help you. So you can only educate people so much, I believe. I think it can be overdone as well. But beyond that, when mistakes inevitably will happen, what are you going to do about it? So this is why I'm excited about things like XDR, because we can get clues from things and saying, if you see unusual activity coming from somewhere, even if it's not malware, that can be a clue that there's something going on in the infrastructure.
Can you talk a bit more about XDR? You mentioned it earlier. How does this work for from individuals to organizations? How does it work, practically speaking?
Yeah, I think XDR is kind of a large company, not a large company, but it's a, for a company, not so much for an individual, but the principles stay the same. Historically in security, we've had this sort of, you get a few clues, but they're really good clues. So, the analogy would be, we have a picture of somebody stealing the bar of gold. That is an indisputable sort of thing. That's a cause for concern. But instead, it turns out that the bad guys, know where the cameras are, they know where the sensors are. Instead, they're going to take other measures. So what other clues can we get? We can get a lot of clues, it turns out, but they're not going to be sort of 100%. But together, they will form a compelling sort of warning to us and saying, there's stuff going on that we need to be concerned about. And that takes a lot of data, but we have the capability now to store large amounts of data. And it turns out that the detections that we can find, we don't need that picture of the bar of gold theft. We know that when we see, the front door open and it's a person we've never seen before, and they're carrying a bag, we get all these clues, and we can have earlier time to detection with this, which is again crucial before damage happens.
Fantastic, yeah. And so that combined with, I suppose, I wanted to take the question again towards kind of like the psychology of the individuals and how that might play together with that, to really tackle any kind of data breach that might happen for an organization. So there's that preemptive, fast detection, and then there's the kind of educating your employees or your company set. Are there practices like this? Like, are there gold standards or places that you know of that are kind of embracing all these angles that could be either mimicked or imitated?
Yeah, absolutely. The education part is in the best organizations it's done. So, you'll see sort of phishing education campaigns. So, something will be sent out to employees, and then instead of naming and shaming individuals, you publish a total and saying, hey, like 30% of the people clicked on this link when it was obviously from the outside, and it was obviously asking you to put in credentials. And track that over time. And I think the people won't necessarily change so much, but maybe some of the, there will change a little bit, but not enough that technology can't help it.
Right.
Also, when there's an event that happens or a special sort of event, like, for example, there was a teleco outage and there was talk of refunds, immediately there was emails sent out by phishing and spam to try to get people to claim their payback, claim their refunds. So again, people are stressed, educate them that there are times of stress, times of, personal issues or whatever the case is. That's when they're most vulnerable.
To expand on that, are there individuals that are most vulnerable to these types of cybersecurity threats?
It has been who is the most valuable have been executives, right? So if I'm trying to do what we call a business email compromise or BEC attack, and I'm trying to get somebody to, send me an invoice, send me, $1 million. That is, great sort of whale phishing. It's also called that. You're going to get an executive to do that. And it does happen. Even there's been stories within Canada that are high profile all around the world as well, where this happens. So we have specific tools to do that, even writing analysis tools that will say, hey, look, this request from the invoice from your CEO is fake, Mr. CFO. That's not them. So that was the target, but now it's shifted one level down. The bad guys realize that, yes, the extra scrutiny that's put on CFOs and CEOs is there. Let's go down to their directors. So in fact, just recently we saw a shift. They're going after the people that report to the people who sign the checks now. So
incredible. It continues. So is there, to switch gears a little bit, is there a difference between data breaches and data privacy?
That's a really good question. I think that the similarity between data that's sensitive for business purposes and data that's sensitive for privacy purposes ends up being the same. Like, we treat it differently. I think you have to treat it differently. Because even a CEO should not have any sort of access to individuals' private information in the company. But there's a real change in, I think, how we're viewing privacy, and there's some really thorny issues about that. So for data privacy now, one of our greatest concerns is lawful intercept or lawful disclosure. So in some countries, like, so many corporations operate sort of multinationally now. So within, the US or Canada, if the authorities come and they have a warrant, you have to, cough up the information legally, unless you believe it's a bad warrant. But generally, we cooperate with law enforcement. But in some countries, the local law enforcement may be the bad guys. So how do you deal with that? So that's as much of an issue, I think, as in many cases having, the information breached. Is if, in fact, it's probably worse, because I can disclose if I've had a data breach of private information, but if the authorities go after it, I may be legally bound to say that I can't tell you that there was a warrant and they got this information. So that's a really, really tricky part of the business right now.
Yeah, it makes you think also a little bit about kind of when the cybersecurity infrastructure is established for an organization or a company. Are those questions, kind of ethical questions in terms of like your privacy or your freedoms, are those thought of at all, either when on the organizational level, when they're establishing a cybersecurity kind of infrastructure, or even when cybersecurity product companies are developing their technology to protect? Is that considered at all? Is that a phase of the development of any product?
Yeah. In my last job, with Gartner, I interacted with, almost every cybersecurity company in the world, at least the larger ones. And I really divided them into two camps. There were those that definitely took a, hey, look, we're gathering information through the security process that could be harmful to individuals. We should take an ethical path there. And then there were those that in the race to, IPO and funding, never put a moment's thought to that. And it's all about the money. And that's one of the, in my personal opinion, one of the downsides of the Bay Area sort of ethos of IT and cybersecurity is not matching the ethical concerns with the business concerns. Now, that being said, the biggest companies, I think, actually do a great job about that. And before they're doing, for example, allowing packet captures. Well, here's a great example. Some of the information gathering you can do on the wire, you can exclude things such as credit card numbers or anything going to a health provider. So you can do a lot of, security gathering of information, but exclude things that are uniquely private and shouldn't maybe not be gathered, or at least give the capability of doing that rather than just, scooping up everything. So I think it's there. I would like to see more legislation around that for sure.
Are there any governments that you know of that have been trying to legislate that process? GDPR, I know in Europe is one step that Europe has been trying to take for that. But do we have any other examples of that working and kind of where it might be going?
I think what the compliance regime we have now for GDPR, HIPAA and PIPEDA, these are great compliance sort of regimes as the goal, but I think we're missing often the technology to implement it. Mm-hmm. So you can have this, you can have good rules there, but what's the enabling technologies that are there? So this ability to exclude information or flag it, or even track or tag that information, it's always been an area that's emerging. So I think that would be a benefit to at least maybe some standards if legislation isn't going to tackle that. To say that, in products, there could be some kind of privacy level of seal of approval if you have those capabilities.
Absolutely. Well, it's comforting to hear at least that there has been some thought around it, and they are taking actions. At least some businesses are. It's good to know. And the legislations, PIPEDA in Canada specifically. I mean, it's good to know that it's moving in that direction. But I mean, tracking technologies and whatnot. I mean, how far away do you think we are until something like that? Efforts like that can align.
I think as I said at the start, I think it's encouraging about the direction we're in right now. So with this, Bill C-26, talking about, mandatory disclosures for critical infrastructure providers, I think that's fantastic. I've always been a fan of mandatory disclosure, not to the public necessarily, but at least to, security authorities, that if our, infrastructure players are all getting hit by something, one, they should call the police. Number two is that the our cyber defenders at the federal level can at least have a communication that's going there, that we don't just expect them to spot it when we're not helping them find it. That's obviously part of the legislation is also to make sure that's done in a way to protect the company's sort of intellectual property. But I think with so much is interconnected now, and it's getting more interconnected, and we're also getting surprising interconnections we didn't know we had. That's I think mandatory disclosure, especially for these key organizations, it has to happen.
Fantastic. And so, why is data privacy so important? Again, I mean, it might be a bit more obvious on a business level, but for individuals themselves, like why should people care about data privacy, going beyond the obvious, financial credit card information being leaked, sort of thing?
As more information, I think in this AI and machine learning sort of era that we're entering, the more information you have disclosed about you, the potentially negative impacts you could have. So I think for a slice of the population, that's of no factor. But when we see potential small indicators for some certain health information, or for even if you're a journalist, even having some minor amounts of your information disclosed, that could lead to loss of life for a source in many countries, or get you denied for health coverage or auto insurance coverage or something, just based on data which may or may not be correct, or maybe which you don't want to share with people. It could affect your education. It could affect, and if the wrong groups are gathering it too, it could lead to you being exploited, or especially for young people, could lead to some exploitation. That could be just awful. So we're all responsible for our own privacy in one way, but I think that we're tracked so much now, and there's so much information available, and we have the tools now to link that information together for bad purposes, not just good purposes. That I know it's increasingly a concern.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this among my colleagues, how easy it is now to, I mean, when you want to log into any kind of app, or you're using any kind of these, if you're using TikTok, or if you're using like these beauty apps that, track your face, and, we immediately, do you want to log in using your so-and-so credentials from Facebook or from Google? And they immediately get access to a bunch of your information that you've provided to Facebook, for example, or, and we often click on that because it's easier, right? To just click on that, but then they get a wealth of information there. The conversation is always, how much does that matter? What are they going to do with it? Is it just going to lead to, if it's a beauty care app, am I just going to get better targeted ads? Are they going to use my data to create some, train some AI model to develop some new tech that might actually be useful? Or, what's the rabbit hole? What's the path that could lead to something more destructive? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but is it? Do you think that's commonplace, or there's more risk involved? Or
I think there's more risk, and it's different for individuals, especially the most vulnerable. I think of somebody who may be transitioning, and that information, or older information being there that they may not want to have. I also think of for example, I've never done one of the genetic results for genealogy purposes, the DNAs, because I am possibly disclosing information that all of my ancestors, my future sort of children, grandchildren, et cetera, have to live with the impact of that. So it is challenging. I really like some of the European rules that are there in place to really take a stronger hand in this. But I think it's caveat emptor right now that the more information that you're giving out, and if you're clicking through some of these accepts, you're getting these apps for free for a reason, and that's because you're paying with your privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the genetic information, and it just makes me think how much of this cybersecurity, what can be put in place, regulation wise, to allow companies, genetics companies like 23andMe, for example, to still be able to advance the science that they hope to advance by gaining this data faster than, say, a research group at a university might be able to gather. What kind of security measures could be placed, do you think, or regulation measures to still let people feel comfortable enough to share that information, to allow the science to grow and expand faster without feeling threatened by, they have all my genetic information, all my DNA?
Yeah, I think there has to be sort of legacy mechanisms in place that when companies are sold or data sold, that the protections carry on with it. So, for example, if my company's bought, if I have a genetic company and it's bought by another company in another jurisdiction, that the approval for that sale could be contingent on, protecting the information of those citizens. I think there has to be something around more the approval of sale, and also the end use that it's going to be put to. So it'd be very easy for even a cord blood company, for example, to be bought by somebody in another area, and there's incredible amounts of information that could be gleaned there. Yes, possibly for fantastic medical benefits, but cord blood has a lot in it. So for not only DNA results, but other possible medical medical information or personal information. So yeah, it's a really thorny field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope we navigate it well.
That's an area I think we're losing out on, actually, is the privacy front. We're doing well in security, but privacy, we seem to be losing ground so quickly right now. It's a bit discouraging.
Just the acceleration of the types of apps and technology that's coming out, just AI algorithms, people training different types of AI models and all the different apps that accompany that. And then it's kind of like the Wild West right now, where all these things kind of come out and everybody's just using them. Do you think that the future of cybersecurity, there's going to be an extra effort on that front when it comes to privacy, or what do you think the future holds when it comes to cybersecurity in general? What kind of threats, what kind of innovations, where are we focusing?
Yeah, I think there's a big change coming. So I've talked about some of the advances we've seen and the positive things. I think we're entering this era of platforms now where we have all these sort of disparate pieces and they don't work well together. But that I think is where the platforms will fix this. That today we have APIs, or how we get information from things. I think the two-way API is really the future in cybersecurity, where we're going to be able to get information but also send more information. And provide it. And the richer those are, I think the better that people will be protected. That I think is going to be the next sort of, competitive front along after XDR, and sort of better telemetry is also how we share information, to share that telemetry that we have in much richer ways. Right now, it's really basic. It's almost like Morse code between some products, and it's one way I can receive a signal, but the ability to send a signal back to saying, hey, stop that connection, or re-image that endpoint, so you're often quite limited. So I think that's really encouraging, as is better use of AI and machine learning to help make faster decisions better, because we're so short of qualified, skilled people in the field. On the privacy front, though, as you brought up, that's probably, I think, the area that almost needs to be a separate market, that it's part of cybersecurity, but it seems like there's so little value put to it. It's just remarkable. Even when the legislation is there, there's some push for it, like, as you mentioned, a few of the the good sort of compliance regimes, but I think that putting greater value on privacy has to be a future advancement.
Great. And just to talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency, because it's all the buzz these days. I mean, where do you think blockchain plays a role here in cybersecurity?
We're in a really bad spot right now, because this has been garbage from day one. I'm an old cryptographer. I'd spent a lot of time with military cryptography, and then, in the PKI era, worked with a lot of technology there. And I smelled a rat, and we've seen the rats now. That in fact, the blockchain is awesome. It's a fantastic, solid technology, but it's much like transporting, using an armored car, checks written in crayon to people without addresses under bridges randomly. The stuff around the blockchain and around cryptocurrency is just the worst thing in the world. Your banks don't operate this way, so why would we allow things to trade other kinds of money to operate in this way? So I think that, for example, the blockchain is a great thing for in medical and privacy. I think that has been underutilized to date. I'm cautious to say that, because I don't want it to be oversold like a lot of the cryptocurrencies have been based on this. But it's all in the implementation. I think that you have this fantastic tool, but what use will we put it to? And for example, me be able to control my medical records and who they get sent to, and see a record of who then accessed them afterwards. That would be extremely powerful from a privacy your privacy perspective. But the apps aren't there yet. Most of our medical sort of apps are very rudimentary, or what I can see or control even from my own medical providers. But that's, I think, the future, and be able to have that information travel with me. I know there's work going on in that area, and that's exciting. I'm excited about using blockchain for other reasons as well. Just for example, just in the day-to-day life of even preventing art fraud. I think that's fantastic use of the tech as well. But it's the apps and the processes around that for some reason people think they can take shortcuts on. So
an exciting place to go, but it's gotta be done well. Again, I mean, we've got to, I
have a hammer.
I hear you.
I have a hammer. What can I do with it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Well, Greg, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I don't have any other questions for you today, but I think this was very helpful, very useful, and I really, really appreciate your time today.
Oh, I appreciate the questions. This was really, really interesting and thought-provoking questions you brought today. So this has been great. I think everybody should have these kinds of discussions more in the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.